This is An Infinite Path, spoken word essays by Niles Heckman, some of which go on to become our documentary short subject films, half of which release freely here through the podcast, all of which can be found through your support at nilesheckman.com. Within any free society, or in more actuality, a society that strives to honestly try and move towards being more free, there is one thing that should be paramount, and it is just what we stated. Drumroll: freedom. What is freedom? An initial Webster's 1828 definition of freedom states it as a state of exemption from the power and control of another, liberty, exemption from slavery, servitude, or confinement, personal, civil, political, and religious, with a secondary, more simple definition being any exemption from constraint or control. Now, within reality in modern society, we, being all individuals, should have the most freedom possible within a certain set of rules, primarily which should contain the caveat of not incurring injury or loss to other property, people, and in a more sophisticated society, within aspects of nature as well. Unless you're going to live off the land and self-impose being part of nature's brutal food chain by foraging and hunting, in which you need to incur occasional injury to other creatures and, in most extreme cases, do perhaps Viking-style skull-cracking followed by potential cannibalism to maintain sustenance during a brutal winter. Instead, within modern political or civil society that's not the purge, which is shared with your fellow women men, one does not have the freedom to say they're going to kill their neighbor without consequence, nor does one have the freedom to steal from their neighbor without consequence, nor does one have the freedom to kill their neighbor as an aggressor without consequence, because all of which would be incurring injury and or loss. Regardless of the rules set by laws, there is no way that any lawmaker would ever come into office by offering to limit the populace's freedom through enacting new rules and laws under their policies. So regardless of party or political orientation, one always has to market themselves on being pro-freedom and in more extreme cases claim their opposition may want to even limit individual freedoms. However, a certain type of politician that is for progress, going forward, promotes real freedom from the two definitions stated prior and means it, because it's democratic freedom within a hopefully conscious and educated voting populace. While another type of politician that is for regress, going backwards, promises freedom, but has to lie about it because it's a faux authoritarian freedom which takes on another hidden element. And in this essay, we give you a basic deconstruction of what that element is. If you, like the majority, are pro-democratic, you want to have the most people possible to have a say in the direct voting on or selection of their representatives. Those whose policies actually do this are called populist. This comprises what is called the proletariat, who are the social class of wage earners, those members of a society whose primary possession of significant economic value is their labor power. They make up 99.9% of society in the third world, and let's say 90+% of society in the first world. Then you have 1 to 10% of society that's called the bourgeoisie, who are the class of business owners and merchants who emerged in the late Middle Ages, originally as a middle class between peasants and aristocracy. They are traditionally contrasted with the proletariat by their wealth, political power, and education, as well as their access and control of cultural, societal, and financial capital, who, under democratic systems, also have a say, but unfortunately a very, very disproportionate amount of power. And a long con is to make people from the proletariat think they are part of the bourgeoisie, when they are not. There are members of the proletariat who are pro-democratic, and there are members of the bourgeoisie who are pro-democratic. However, when one is pro-authoritarian, they are the opposite of being pro-democratic because the pro-democratic coalition wants both to have their say, and that's why they can be truthful, while the pro-authoritarian minority only wants their small minority who happen to be the bourgeoisie and none of the proletariat to have their say. That's why they have to lie and spin. So we have continued and will continue to juxtapose in this series one who is pro-democracy versus one who is pro-authoritarian, as authoritarianism is a political system characterized by the rejection of political plurality, the use of a strong central power to preserve the political status quo, no matter how crap, and reductions in the rule of law, separation of powers, and democratic voting. In our country, the United States, we are not a true democracy. If we were, every citizen would vote on each piece of legislation proposed both at a state and federal level. Although there are advantages to that way of governing, and due to technical advances from when our country began, we should move toward being more like that with perhaps some sort of system similar to the Reddit upvote dynamic. All initially done on analog paper, of course, and we will get more into the heart of democracy, which is voting, later in this series. We instead are still currently a democratic elected constitutional republic, in which we elect representatives to create and vote on legislation. And as a result, unfortunately, have only two primary parties named after this system. One is the more left-leaning centrist party called the Democrats, who are interested in people, and the other is the more right-leaning party called the Republicans that's interested in property. Although we are politically independent, meaning we do not tie ourselves to be a member of either of these specific parties, and have in the past voted across multiple parties, our voting history has primarily extended across parties that use colors such as blue and green. The green is a small third party, but the blue is the Democrats, which we wish were even better because they suck ass at messaging and are still a corporate light middle-of-the-road party. However, they are the more balanced party, and this is a podcast, one aspect of which is based in seeking balance, and are comprised of a spectrum of quite liberal people to quite more moderate conservative people, who comprise part of a pro-democratic coalition, and for the most part have representatives which actually work to represent the proletariat and are generally the more truthful of the two main parties. The other main party in the United States, the Republican Party, is red, and ever since we were a young tween, because we were not indoctrinated into extremist imperial religion, which is the foundation of the whole party, knew it was a crew whose tactic was to divide and conquer by spreading fear or full hate. And because they have always only really been concerned with representing the corporate bourgeoisie class, it has always had to somewhat pretend it's for democracy and is instead just about power and control over the proletariat. Even though that's been the playbook of the party our whole life, being the less than truthful of the two parties, in more recent years it has denigrated heavily into becoming something that's not conservative, in the true sense of the word, but has now transmuted into a fascism meets idiocracy authoritarian clown show, lie with every breath cult, which is now saying some of the quiet parts out loud, including sometimes openly announcing its hostility to democracy. While we will get more into deconstructing this later in this series, a gentleman named Ethan Gray, who was once in the Red Cult and was strong enough to leave, gave an excellent example deconstructing its past and present messaging on freedom, which the corporate legacy media, meaning even the networks outside of the full propaganda media, have, in our lifetimes, done a crap job of having any direct conversation about with the American people because they are, for the most part, corporate networks who seem to be A-OK with fascism light. Why? Sadly, because they are not interested in being real hard-hitting journalists that speak truth to power, who fight the bourgeoisie man, but instead work for the bourgeoisie man because they know they can make more money doing so. Hence, the sad state of the Fourth Estate is if one wants to speak truth to power and hard call out liars, one generally has to go outside the main to do that, which is resulting in an old paradigm Fourth Estate that won't structurally fix its messaging problems, flowering a new Fourth Estate to take over in the old one's place, with this series being one aspect of us doing our part to help with that. So you will hear this deconstruction on an obscure blog or an obscure podcast rather than on corporate media, by a random guy who happens to be us combined with Ethan, a former cult member who had the strength, willpower, and spiritual development to deprogram himself and get out of a cult, and deserves compliments for doing so. Here are his insights, along with our insights, on the Red Cult's messaging on everything of importance. You cannot tell them what to do. They, however, can tell you what to do. You've watched the Republican Party champion the idea of freedom, air quotes, while you have also watched the same party openly assault various freedoms, like the freedom to vote, freedom to choose, freedom to have what books you want available at the public library, and freedom to marry who one wants, and so on. If this has been a source of confusion, then your assessments of what Republicans mean by freedom were likely too generous. Here's what they and other authoritarian parties throughout the world mean by freedom, for themselves and their members alone. The freedom from being told what to do, the freedom to tell other people what to do. So with this in mind, let's examine some of our political issues with an emphasis on who is telling who what to do. And there will be no ambiguity about what the world's authoritarian parties' underlying basic actions are ever again. Not what is said, but what they attempt to do. Starting with the COVID-19 worldwide situation, origins aside and pharmaceutical industry profits and greed from maximizing said profits aside, which are whole other stories, we were told by experts in infectious diseases across the world that to control the spread of the and if you're more conspiracy-minded, plandemic, it would be wise to socially distance, which on a side note is a terrible term, as we are social beings who desperately need social connection, so way better to call it temporarily physically distance. Thus we were told by them to temporarily physically distance, wear masks in public spaces, and get vaccinated. So, in a general sense, we were being told what to do. Guess who had a big problem with that? All Republicans saw were certain people trying to tell them what to do, which was enough of a reason to make it their chief priority to insist that they will not be told what to do, even though what they were told to do could be said to save lives, including their own. As you can see, this is a very stunning commitment to refuse to be told what to do, and in many cases was used as an excuse to do the exact opposite. So during this time, we saw corporate grifting, regressive, collectivist, dogmatic, false Christian cult churches of empire who hate science and know nothing of spirituality packed together for service without a mask in sight, while we saw more true and moderate science-accepting churches of unity encouraging their attendees to wear KN95s during their services, as well as indigenous people hiking miles to get vaccinated. On the room-splitting subject of abortion, which we touched on prior in this series, and congrats if you're still listening, claims of being pro-life are actually forced birth don't care about life by patriarchs who want to disempower women. But Republicans will nevertheless use marketing spin to claim to be the pro-life party because they recognize pro-life, air quotes, marketing lies can be used to tell people what to do, especially the female half of the species. The reason they lie about being pro-life, air quotes, when they are trying to tell women what to do with their bodies is not out of genuine concern for human life, but because they recognize that in this position, they can tell women what to do and claim it's about another's life. That's why when you use the same appeal of pro-life, air quotes, towards asking Republicans to help pass legislation regarding doing something about gun violence in schools, it doesn't work. Because there is no bigger subject for them than the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, because on their end, they are pro-violence, and on your end, in order to couple common sense rules with that right, you are now in the position of telling authoritarian homosexuals what to do. And that's precisely why they don't want to do anything about it. Hence you get, "Come and take it," and "From my cold dead hands" bumper stickers. So for a party that claims to care about life, but is really an end times death cult, gun violence in schools is not a problem, but their children having to wear masks in school is, because somebody outside of their cult is telling their children what to do. Since the primary trait of modern American republicanism is being selfish, someone else's dead children bother them significantly less than someone else telling their children what to do. Only they should do that because they are patriarchal extremist religionists who view their children as their property, especially their daughters. They claim to be for small government, but that really means a government that tells them what to do should be as small as possible. But when the Republican Party recognizes it has the opportunity to tell people what to do, they are more than happy to grow government and have long had deep state envy, real or illusionary. The reason Republicans are always so infatuated with the border, specifically the one connecting the US of A to Mexico, isn't because they care about border security. It's because they recognize it as the most glaring example of when they can tell other people what to do, specifically poor brown people. And if that's poor brown women, then that's extra icing on their hate cake. That's why it's their favorite issue. You want in? Too bad. We'll tell you what to do, and you have no say. If Republicans could do this in every social space, tell the people who aren't like them, too bad, get the fuck out, that would be something resembling their ideal society. There are economic policies that we can demonstrate would be of obvious benefit to all voters, including Republican ones from the Proletariat, who have been conned by decades of mainlining propaganda TV networks and AM hate squawk radio into acting against their own interests on behalf of the bourgeoisie. So how do Republican leaders kill potential support for these policies? Make the issue about who is telling who what to do. So for example, if we were a Labor or Green Party politician who said we're going to raise taxes on the top 1% of income earners so Godzillionaires can have only 2 Gulfstream jets instead of 5 Gulfstream jets, and in exchange we can have higher nationwide salaries for public school teachers. The framing from the red cult is that someone outside of their party are the people telling their cult members what to do. If you want to know why Republicans can easily be taken out of proposals from green, blue, and other non-red cult parties that are shown to be of benefit to them directly, it is precisely because they have to entertain the idea of someone like Democrats telling their members what to do. What should be understood here from the beginning is that you are dealing with a very worst-case scenario, mean and selfish bully with no heart, a corrupted mind, but a lot of will on an elementary schoolyard who says no one but them should ultimately be in the position to tell anyone else what to do. Only they can do that, hence they are the authority, hence they are authoritarian. On the issue of anthropogenic climate change, in Australia, the United Kingdom, and America, primarily influenced by Murdoch mind-rotting propaganda networks in those 3 nations, we're now at the point where many regressives in those countries don't regard it as a serious issue to the extent that they think it is a liberal hoax. The causes of climate change aside, in regards to the environment of our beautiful planet, there are 2 types of people on the subject. The type who want to use our lands, rivers, skies, and oceans as toilets, and those who do not. We are on the side of both David Attenborough and the indigenous people and the environmentalists, and are a strong advocate for not using them as toilets, as we have been doing for the last couple centuries since the Industrial Revolution began. So, when putting forth policies to support such things, and doing so involves telling Republicans to do something for the sake of the planet, you are still ultimately telling them what to do. Furthermore, you are conceiving the planet as not only a potential spiritual ecosystem, but as something alive and important that all human beings should have to share in an ecological balance. Since American regressives' underlying foundation is based on the religions of empire, not only do they not have interest in sharing it, but think God put those things here for them to colonize, conquest, and extract for prosperity gospel profit, which is a paramount example of their despiritualization. Now here's where things get interesting. When you explain to Republicans you want them to do something and explain it's on the basis of benefiting other people and the environment by not using it as a toilet, then you have really crossed a line. Not only did you tell them what to do, you told them to consider other humans and living creatures. The whole point of an arrangement where you can tell people what to do, but you can't be told what to do, is precisely to avoid having to consider others. This is why this is their ideal arrangement, so they don't have to do that. This is why this is a very toxic schoolyard bully relationship with the idea of who can tell who what to do. So much so that it seems like the entire point is to conceive of a right kind of person who can tell other people what to do without being told what to do, doesn't it? So let's add one more component to this dysfunctional dark imperial shadow mindset for who tells who what to do. There are right human beings and there are wrong ones. The right ones get to tell the wrong ones what to do. The wrong ones do not tell the right ones what to do. As you can see, we've been hinting at what past essays in this pro-democracy series have built upon in regards to anti-democratic authoritarian ideology, which is who the authoritarian views as their right people, which in Liberia or Sierra Leone are crazy black authoritarian warlord fascists with child soldier armies who pretend to have something to do with Christianity. In Saudi Arabia or Iran are brown extremist fundamentalist Muslims that pervert Islam and smash statues from ancient Persia with sledgehammers. In Myanmar are autocratic military state Asian generals trying to weaponize Buddhism. And in the United States are straight-only allowed white male Anglo-Saxon Protestants, WASPs, who are false Christian supremacists and not real love-thy-neighbor Christians. All of which are cults that can be so large they can even prop up accompanying caste system structures. While in each case, the wrong people are everyone else in the multi-philosophical, multi-science, multi-faith, multi-ethnic, worldwide, pro-democratic coalition that makes up the majority of the population. Hence, if you're in a cult, you're considered right, but if you're not in a cult, you're considered wrong. And we'll be heading over into the nested layers of cults in the next essay in this series.